Uh, Everyone's time, let's get started. Welcome everyone. I'm Emma, for those of you I haven't met yet, and I'm the Director of the Children's Literature Programs here. And it's my great honor to introduce my very good friends, Kate and Jim, this afternoon. Most of you, I'm sure, are aware of their amazing body of work, but I'll just take a moment to give you a few highlights and key points. Jim and Kate, of course, share a last name because they're married. But they also have and they work together and collaborate a great deal, and one of their great successes, which they're going to be speaking about today, is their picture book collaboration. But they also both have independent careers in children's literature and in the art world. Kate has a wonderful list of both picture books and middle grade books that she's written over the years. The Mythomania series, some of you may be aware of. Fluffy the Guinea Pig. Many wonderful picture books and middle grade books, and of course her collaboration with Jim, the Stinky Dirty Mighty Bad books, which you'll hear more about. Jim McMullan, for those of you who may not know, in addition to being an extraordinarily gifted illustrator, is a remarkable painter who has been the sole poster artist for Lincoln Center Theater for how many years, Jim? For 27 years. So anybody who has been to Lincoln Center in New York, if you've seen those wonderful posters for Anything Goes and Carousel and Arcadia and all those wonderful productions over the years, every single one of those posters was painted by Jim. So he has a life as an artist, and then as a poster artist, and also as a picture book illustrator and other books as well. And I'm very fortunate to have had the privilege of collaborating with Jim on a poetry anthology that my mother and I edited a couple of years ago. So that was a rare treat. Kate and Jim live in Sag Harbor and are good friends of the program. Jim is teaching here this week. And ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jim and Kate McMullan.
Thank you, Emma. That was so nice. Well, I'm Kate McMullan. If you had any doubt about that. This is Jim. And we'd like to start by talking a little bit about how we do our picture books together, about the process of it. Because when you see a picture book and it's only 32 pages and it's really, there's not much text, and it looks like it would be pretty easy to do that. And in my experience, it is not easy to do that. It's much easier to write long novels and things like that than to condense everything into to make it short and make it work. So we'll start doing that, and then maybe we'll take some questions if you have them. And then Jim has a PowerPoint showing his theater posters. And I know some of you are in the theater program, so you might be interested in that. And then we'd like to take questions. Right? Okay.
And then you'll be signing books if anybody. Kate and Jim's books are in the bookstore, and there will be a little period of time afterwards where they'll be here and available to sign them if you're interested.
Okay, well this slide, the title, Making Stinky Dirty Mighty Bad Books, those are the titles of some of our books. This was the street that we lived on in Manhattan. It's 26th Street and Lexington Avenue, and every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday morning it looked like this because all the garbage bags from all the big apartment buildings were out on the sidewalk. And we lived on the 12th floor of an apartment building, and you'd think it would be quiet up there, but it really wasn't quiet. And at one point in February of, I don't know, in the 90s, a garbage truck started parking under our window and compacting trash at about 5 in the morning. Jim slept right through it, but I was like, it woke me up. So one morning, I just had had enough, and I'm a lot crankier than Jim, so I threw on my clothes and went down in the elevator and out into the night to tell the sanitation workers to park under somebody else's window. But when I saw the truck illuminated under the spotlight, and in the back of the truck was this old couch, and the garbage truck was slowly and loudly crunching up the couch, I thought, this is so cool. And I didn't feel that cranky anymore, and I thought, I'm going to try to write a book about this. So I started going down to 26th Street and sitting on this little red pipe that stuck out from our building and waiting for the garbage guys to come. And the garbage truck would come, and I would watch the guys, the take up these really heavy bags and I would write down what lights were blinking and what noises were being made, doing my research. And finally, one of the guys came up to me and he said, "Are you from central office? Are we doing something wrong?" And I said, "No, I want to write a book, a children's book about a garbage truck, but I don't know how it works." He goes, "Why didn't you ask us?" So that was Earl Harrington, the guy who's standing by the truck, and his partner Billy King, and they were so incredibly nice, and they were the greatest guys, and they did help us. And you can see I'm there with my little nerdy writer's notebook, writing down that Earl is telling me the back of the garbage truck is called the hopper. And I ask a million questions, and here is Billy. He's bored out of his mind answering my questions. He's told me that this is the crusher blade. And finally, I said, "Jim, do you want to do a book with me about a garbage truck?" And Jim said,
No.
and I said, "But Jim, you like trucks."
Yeah, so I finally agreed to come down and look at the truck, and I saw Edward G. Robinson. I saw this tough little face on the front of the garbage truck, and that thing, the snowplow connector in the middle of the front of the truck, I saw as the nose. I saw the big bumper as the kind of chin. I saw all the rivets as the stubble on his chin. I saw the windshield as his eyes. It was intriguing that it was a truck that had dual operations, so that they can go to each side of the street and the driver can just switch from side to side and still operate the truck. This is where we asked them, could we see how the truck really works, how it comes apart and everything, and said, well, we're not supposed to do that, but we're going to pull around this next quiet street and follow us there, and we'll show you. So very much against all of their rules, they actually opened up the truck, which only happens, at the end where they go to the garbage, the barge, and they dump all the stuff out. So anyway, we got to see that.
They were 3 weeks from retirement. They decided to risk it.
So this is my first.
This is the cover.
No, this is actually the cover. Right, this is the cover of it, and you can see how that idea of Edward G. Robinson kind of evolved into this cover. This is one of the inside spreads. Kate gives me all these problems with her writings, and one of the problems was that 10 wide tires. So I'm thinking, how in hell do I show 10 wide tires? They wouldn't really be visible. So then I thought of the truck sort of doing a chase thing of coming up over the mountain and showing it from underneath. So students, in every problem, there is a new solution, right?
I didn't realize why he did that. And about 2 years after the book came out, I said, "Why did you make the truck flying off the road like that?" He said, "So the kids can count the tires."
So here's another inside spread, which we use X-ray vision to see the compacting of the
I want to just say one thing.
Oh, yes. Right. No, that's the most important thing you said.
You can see how well we work together. When I first wrote the text for I Stink,
You should probably stand a little closer.
when I first wrote the text for this book, I didn't actually call it I Stink, I called it Trasharama. And it was a fairly long manuscript, and it started out, "I traveled the night roads, my headlights shine like moons," which really wasn't that great. So out of all these words, and there were probably 1,800 words, there are only 2 lines that made it into the final draft, and they're here. And those lines were, "Did I wake you? Too bad." And those lines seem to capture the spirit of the garbage truck and his spirit, his feisty spirit. So those lines really kept informing me, and I would go back to them. And it seems sort of stupid now, in retrospect, to think that, I would just read those lines over and over, but it did, and it helped me get the whole voice of the truck. And finally, I felt like the voice was consistent with those lines. So it took a long time for me.
So this is the garbage alphabet, and I don't know how many. No, just have that one spread. Okay, so this is the part that the kids like the best about this, which is the dirty diapers and the puppy poo and the
Ugly underpants.
ugly underpants and all of that. So we've now done, how many of these vehicle books we've done?
I think we've done 12 books altogether,
Yeah.
13. And
Anyway, in each of these books there is a game, and it sort of came out of what happened in this first book, which the garbage alphabet became the game. So in each book we tried to find a game. Here's the final spread. And that's, the garbage truck book began with a question, who am I? And it ends with the answer, the garbage truck, that's who, despite the fact that you've spent the whole book looking at a garbage truck. But in any case, that was I thought, a very nice way that Kate set up a kind of trajectory.
I'll just tell you about the title if I stick to this. Go on over.
It's on the side.
Anyway, I'll just lean over here by you. Trashorama was the title, and my editor was the one who said, you know, Kate, I don't know, I think maybe you should just call it I Stink, because there's a line in there. What's that? You think I stink? Woo-wee, do I ever? No skunk ever stunk this bad. So I'd become really good friends with Billy and Earl, the sanitation workers by then. And I really didn't want to tell them that we were going to call the book I Stink. But I had to do it because, you know, they were helping me and everything. So I said, you know, my editor doesn't want to call the book Trashorama. She wants to call it I Stink. And Billy goes, I hate to tell you this, Kate, but that's such a better title than that one you have. Editors can be very helpful. And it really was. I'm deeply grateful.
So we decided to make our next book about a tugboat. I've always loved tugboats, and it seemed like a great story. It was happening right after 9/11, and when we made this decision, and I tried to get us onto a tugboat in New York Harbor, but there was just no way. So finally, I decided to call a tugboat company in Boston, and they said, "Sure, you know, come on up. You know, we can put you on a tugboat." So we went up to Boston and did our research about tugboats, and this boat in Boston. Right.
It was February, and I'm interviewing the captain. It's about 36 degrees. And the captain, actually, we thought, oh, he's going to be so excited that we're going to, you know, put his name in the picture book. And it turned out there was already a film about him on Channel 13. He was already a big star. But he was great. He showed us everything, the names of everything, because one thing I try to do is get the vernacular down for each of these vehicles of what's it really called, and try to get the voice of the vehicle in that way. So that's why I write it all down.
Sometimes when Kate is in this rather long process of making the text work and making the story work and everything, I'll try to help her out. And I'll do some character studies or whatever I think of that might push the process along a little bit. So in this case, I did these two drawings. Actually, I did quite a few drawings, but these are two of the drawings that I did while she was writing. And I'm not sure that they were helpful at all, but it is part of the give and take as this writing process goes on, where we'll talk about the writing. And I'm not taking any credit. I don't do the writing, but I guess I'm in it in some way, and part of it is by doing drawings to test out how the character might look. So this is the cover for I'm Mighty. Then,
After I'm Mighty, we moved from the city out here full time, and I kept seeing these backhoe loaders on these trucks going back and forth. And they were intriguing to me because they have a big bucket on one end and a little bucket on the other end, and the cab kind of moves in between them. So I thought it would be a great thing to have each of the buckets have a voice. It'd be like a poetry slam, and they would each talk. Jim is a really good critic, and he said, it just sounds really schizophrenic. You shouldn't do that. So I went back to having one voice for the tribe, but finding the voice is always the tricky part. And I say finding the voice because you can't, in my experience, you cannot really just decide, well, the voice is going to be like this, and then just start writing in that voice. The voice has to really come to you in some way. At least that's what I think. So here I am taking notes on the backhoe loader. The guy is taking out a stump. And then we went on a very glamorous, our research is very glamorous. There's the stump, which is a big spread in the book. And then we went to the dump, the local dump, and I spared you most of the pictures, but this is the washing machine someone was throwing out.
And that's the cover of I'm Dirty.
Oh, I will
tell
tell you
us
about
sort of,
that.
yes.
Yeah, this is when I finally had what I really, I was searching and searching for the voice, and I was taking my dogs for a walk one day, and watching, I have these French bulldogs, and I was behind them, and I was watching my dog's little rear end go like this, and I thought how cute he was. And this line came to me, who's got a boom, a dipper stick, and a bucket with a row of chompers? Me, and that's just my rear end. That's it, that's my line. And I'm like, Toby, come on, we're going back home, I gotta write this down. And Toby is a bulldog, and he's going, walk. So I walk, I spend the next 45 minutes walking him going, who's got a boom, a dipper stick, and a bucket with a row of chompers? I just kept saying it because I thought I would forget it. And I thought, this is the line. So I finally got home and managed to remember.
This is the game in I'm Dirty, which is the counting down as he's cleaning up all of the things: 10 torn up truck tires, 9 fractured fans, 8 busted beach umbrellas, 7 lost lawn chairs, and so forth. And then we finally get to the one wonky washing machine. But it was a lot. I don't know what I have to say about this, except that it was a lot of fun doing these diagrammatic drawings of this little machine moving through all of these things and seeing it from different angles and really making it as lively as possible. And then he cleans up everything, and he's dirty, and he's very proud of himself. So,
after doing the backhoe and studying backhoes and watching these buckets, sometimes take branches and everything, they kept reminding me of dinosaurs. So we did we did 2 books. We segued into dinosaurs from vehicles, and we did I'm Bad, about a little dinosaur who isn't really bad. He thinks he's bad, and we went to the Museum of Natural History in New York to research this one. And Jim saw the T-Rex there. It has these big teeth that are as long as a banana and really sharp, and he said, those are just too scary. So Jim gave our dinosaur bunny rabbit teeth. And then we did I'm Big, about one of the big dinosaurs. And then we went back to vehicles, quickly back to vehicles. And I'm Fast is the only book that we didn't stock train engineers. I couldn't figure out really how to do that. But there was so much. By then the internet had evolved, and there were all these journals of these kids who ride the trains, and it was so interesting. And they would talk about which stations they liked to go in and how you could switch to trains. I don't think they bought tickets. I think they were riding for free, but it was really a great voice for me. It informed a lot of the book. So this is a race between a fully loaded freight train and a little red race car, and the game is to find the race car in every spread.
I like to start the illustrations for the book kind of setting the scene, like the beginning of a movie where you, like those helicopter shots where you come down into the town and finally into through the window and into the parlor. So this is where we see the train way out in the distance. We see the train and the car now a little closer, and then finally the beginning of the book, we're introduced to the characters. So that's.
I always thought those two spreads were like a Wild West, like the gunslinger coming into town,
Yeah. Those are sketches, by the way. And then this is a spread where we had to find one way, or one spread where we show the whole freight train. And yet it isn't so distant but it's boring to look at. Another spread from that.
And we have the backhoe loader in that spread, and
Oh, yes, yes.
we worked in an homage to ourselves here. The backhoe loader
And
the garbage truck.
and there's the little garbage truck, yeah. And
Weston Woods through Scholastic does these great videos of picture books. I don't know if you know them or not, but they did one of I'm Fast, and
Stanley Tucci.
Stanley Tucci was the narrator, and he was a great train. Okay, this is Jim Lynn. We decided to go for a fire engine, so I went into New York City and talked to this guy. He was fantastic. Let me climb all over the truck and everything. So Jim is working on that book now. It's called I'm Brave. I don't know if we have. Oh yeah, see. And he got out all these burglar tools that are inside the fire truck, and he's breaking in. He showed me how he can break it. Of course, you want somebody to break into your house, right, when it's on fire. So, but he was a very cool guy. Now we're friends on Facebook.
One of the ironic things is that in New York City, they have fire trucks that are like 10 years old or 12 years old.
No, older.
Older, okay. And here come to Sag Harbor, they have brand new, $200,000 fire trucks. So this is one of the spreads from the book that I'm finishing up at this point.
The manuscript I work on right now is about a Zamboni. I love Zamboni, so I've always wanted to do one. And he's kind of a square character. That's it on the picture book.
So before we go on to a little bit about theater posters, do you want to ask us questions about this part of the presentation?
You were talking about how you've got an edit team, your husband and your editor, but how do you edit Jim's visual presentation? I mean, how do you critique him or say this works or it doesn't match the voice? How does that process work?
We work so closely together on the manuscript, really, because Jim is my first reader, and we'll go back and forth, and he's very, very good at helping me get the voice and the right and finding his own visual opportunities. Like last night, we talked about the Zamboni for a long time, and I had all this internal stuff. The Zamboni is quite complicated under that big square surface. And he said, you know what, I can't, go inside the Zamboni for page after page. We've got to expand it out. So we kind of developed the whole visual look for the book at that stage. I guess when we're looking at sketches, I'll make suggestions, but the truth is I never say, I don't think this character is right for the voice or something like that, because we've collaborated so much on it. But I think you raise another point, is that when you write a picture book manuscript, you get it as good as it can be, and then when there is really art, usually at the sketch stage, I take out a lot of words. They have to be there at first to inform the pictures, but once the pictures are there, they're not necessary anymore. So you can really, at that point, minimalize the words. Because I think there are just about 350 words in my sting. I mean, it's not many words.
Do you consider the book from the trucks fiction or nonfiction? I mean, I kind of
talking vehicles, so they aren't categorized.
No, but you give so much information,
I know.
especially.
I told my
Feels like a-
editor on I Stink, I said, this is nonfiction. And he said, really? Because with fiction, you know, the fiction picture books are just alphabetized by the author's name, and I thought no one's ever going to find it. And if it's nonfiction, then they could look it up under garbage.
Yeah,
and
garbage,
stuff.
yeah.
So I really,
But never get the process.
but we do try to tell the absolute truth and make it as close as we can to giving them a nonfiction account of these vehicles, if they could talk.
You use a lot of vehicles in your books. Do you ever find it challenging to keep the stories fresh? Like now you're doing the Zamboni and the fire engine, or do you just, does your fact that they're different from each other help to keep it fresh?
Yeah, I think we have a template that has worked in the books, but I think once you get inside that, because the vehicles are so different, their worlds are different. So it has never felt like we're just mailing it in, you know, with, oh, let's do this vehicle and just plug it into the, it's never felt like that. I wish it would sometimes. It always is a little bit reinventing, which is good. It's good.
Okay,
Do you
well,
have a title for the Zamboni yet?
I'm cool.
Oh.
All the other titles have exclamation points, but no, he's going to have a period. Here, I'll let you go.
Actually, while Gordon is switching the slides, I would love for you to speak to how the difference between collaborating with one another and then collaborating for Jim with other authors or for Kate with other illustrators. That process, that adjustment.
well, actually, I haven't, I've done 2 books with a woman named Karma Wilson. And I've done the poetry book with You and Your Mother. But I can't even remember now. Books mostly
I don't think I'd let you collaborate.
I don't think you do. So I found the process, the books with Karma Wilson, they were very simple, little funny poems about farm animals, and it worked fine. It worked fine. I never had anything to do with her. We never spoke. We never, there was no connection at all. I mean, when I worked with you and Julie, we had a terrific meeting at my studio to begin with, right? And you told me what you were thinking about of the spirit of the book visually, and I had prepared a couple of things that I showed you to sort of say, well, this is how I see it, So there was that moment where you could have said, Jim, I don't think this is working, but at that point we sort of signed off on each other, we had a good editor, and she was a kind of conduit for us, between us, so that worked very well. But this is a very live process with Kate, the being in the story making end of it is very exciting for me, so yeah, I love it. All right, so,
Another question.
oh, yeah.
Have you, Kate, has James created an image that you've seen either in a poster or book or something, or this is the story, and then it comes first in the story?
Well, I do. Jim did a series of, I wrote a series called Mythomania about the Greek myths, and I wanted Jim to illustrate it, and he had done some sketches of Hades, what the god Hades looked like, and they're just like these crazy sketches of these guys in different, ancient Greek helmets and Cerberus by his side, and when I saw them, I really thought, oh, let's do a graphic novel on, using these characters.
Yeah.
And I really hope that we can do that at some point.
Yeah, I hope so too. It was interesting that the editor was not at all interested in having me illustrate it, and she didn't. particularly think that my drawings were appropriate. And when the books finally came out, they had these very highly rendered, cartoony things that were very alien to me. You know, I mean, I just like shuddered when I saw them. But they worked. I mean, so the editor really did understand something about the audience for which these books would be, you know, best suited. You know, sometimes you have to go along with that other kinds of vision. I still think that the way we were thinking would work. You know, we were thinking of more sort of Captain Underpants or something like that, which would have been fun. So anyway,
I'll be your
okay,
technical assistant.
We'll just run through a bunch of these posters in case, I'm sure lots of you have no idea about these posters. So I used this one because it's the cover of the book on my posters, and a lot of people liked it. It was a very popular show. Okay. Most of my work is in watercolor or gouache. This happens to be a pastel drawing, and a little bit different for me. But in this case, I have James McDaniel, who, if you ever watched Hill Street Blues, he was Lieutenant Fancy on Hill Street Blues. He's a terrific actor. And he came to my studio, and at first I tried to actually draw him on the spot. That didn't quite work, so I took a lot of photographs of him. Out of those photographs, I did this. This is also not a watercolor. It's a pen and brush drawing. I guess it's colored with watercolor or ink. Maybe not. I think ink. The lettering harks back to when I was doing posters for the butcher shop in this little town in Canada in speedball lettering, and so I did this kind of a homage to the old style of lettering in the bottom, which was, you know, appropriate for this play, which goes back to the 40s.
A lot of editors have this in their office, a lot of newspaper editors.
Yeah. It's probably one of my most popular posters. This is a play, an English playwright, very, very interesting play. Okay, next. This is by John Robin Bates, who is doing.
He's here this week.
He's here this week, and I've done posters for 3 of his plays so far. I think this is my favorite poster of the ones I've done for him.
Those are my ankles.
Oh yeah, and that's Casey. Look at all these delicate balance. Dinner date. That's Kate in the background, shrinking back.
I am the model of most convenience.
This is for Jules' play, Bad Friend, which she reviewed this week. Those of you were, I wouldn't be here, but nevertheless.
Jim, while we're here, you're going to talk about how they got there. I would love to hear you talk about the balance between how much freedom you have to respond to the play yourself as an artist versus how much the producers say, here's what we want on the poster. And
Well,
the thing will sell.
I rarely get, here's what we want. They always wait to do it, to see what I do so they can pounce on it. And in this case, I was doing a poster for a man who could obviously have done his own poster, you know, Jules, right? So I was a little bit nervous in this case, you know, and so Jules saw my sketch and he said, well, maybe the girl should be bigger. And so I said, no, it won't work graphically. There's the big face in the background, and then the three other elements have to be more or less the same size. And he thought about it for a minute and he said, you're right. So, you know, I was able in that case to talk graphics with somebody, which you know, if I do that with a producer or a playwright, it usually means nothing. But Jules sort of understood what I was talking about. You couldn't have the kind of descending order that would have happened if I'd made the girl a lot bigger. Does everyone get that? Okay. So this is the process on two posters. All right, these are like very early sketches. After I've read the play and I'm thinking about it and I'm thinking about this kid. It's a coming-of-age story, Our Wilderness, and it's about a young artist, in the sense of a teenager who knows already that they want to do something that is going to sort of pull them out of their peer group in a way, and that they want to be interested in art. They want to be artful. They want to be creative. They want to, you know, be in that special zone, that special category of artist. And so what happens in a lot of cases when somebody 11, 12, 13, 14 years old starts to make that decision or see themselves in that way, it certainly happened to me, you just get insufferable. You know, I remember when I was going through that, I found records by Bela Bartok, and I would really like to play them loud at home and really annoy my mother. You know, in other words, I wanted to say, I'm a special case. I'm now an artist. I know so much more about beautiful things than you do, or any of my relatives, or any of my friends. You know, so in this case, in this play, he is writing poetry, but in order to impress this girl, he's pretending to have written this poetry that is really written by a very good poet. And so he meets her at the beach, and he's all ready to read this poetry to her and pass it off as his own poetry. So that's what I'm thinking about as I'm doing this. But I'm thinking about this very romantic idea of how this kid coming into his own as an artist, but he's not there yet. These are other drawings that I'm doing. And sometimes, you know, style, I think of myself not really having a style, and I think to some degree that's true, but I also at the same time understand that how you do something, the materials you use, the degree of stylization, the degree of how realistic or non-realistic you are, is all part of the information that you're conveying. So I'll often do something here where I will you know, experiment with, in this case, a kind of heavy, what I'd call it like old-fashioned style and a certain degree of caricature. The older I get, the more and more I believe in caricature. The more I believe that all art should veer towards caricature. Next. Another color sketch. Okay, now this was an important photograph of me. I found it, I don't know where, I guess, you know, I was doing, finding everything I could about Eugene O'Neill, and I found a series of photographs of him at the beach in Cape Cod with his family. And something struck me about his posture, these legs crossed and these hands crossed and everything. There was something uncomfortable and effete about it, you know, that he is the kind of arty kid that's not so good at softball and, you know, is not an entirely easygoing physical person. So I thought that's my key. What I look for in all of my work, particularly in my theater posters, is where can I connect personally? You know, where can I find something in this that is like me or is like what I like, or you know. So I keyed into that. So next, I asked the actor Sam Trammell, who was playing the kid. He came to my studio and I said, "This is my idea, Sam." And I showed him the picture of Eugene O'Neill, and I said, "So I want you to give me a series of poses that have a kind of a feet awkwardness about them as you hold this poetry book." So he did. I don't know how many of them I've got in this book. So here's a sketch I did from one of the photographs of him. And here's the finished poster. So it started with a very, very personal response to something that is a little bit outside the play, because it's really about the playwright and not just the play. So that's Our Wilderness. Okay. South Pacific. All right. Now, when I did the poster for South Pacific, I had nothing to work from. I always do these posters long before the play is cast, before I don't get to go to a rehearsal, or people imagine I go to a rehearsal and then do a poster. I'm doing the poster. I'm now doing the poster of Macbeth, and Lady Macbeth has not even been cast yet, but they want something in 2 weeks. Anyway, so I look through everything I've got about Second World War, about about South Sea Islands, anything that I can find that might help me, just a sort of far-ranging kind of thing. But none of it really was taking me anywhere. So then I looked at production photographs from old South Pacific things, and they were helpful in a way. But they didn't really turn me on. They looked sort of like, they would lead to kind of a 1940s movie poster or something, which is not what I really wanted to do. There's more of them. But I always knew that Nurse Nellie Forbush, thank you. Nellie Forbush would be central to the thing. And this wonderful costume of, the oversized sailor suit. Okay, so these I took off I ran the 1940s movie, and I just photographed from the screen. This is the only way I knew how to do it. I think now you can do screen grabs or something like that, but I had no idea how to do it. So I just took my Nikon and aimed it at my TV and photographed the TV, so I got terrible photographs. But I got all of this stuff that I finally thought about, and my first sketches were terrible. And sometimes, sometimes I have to get rid of these bad ideas. You just have to, you kind of know they're bad ideas, but you have to just do them and get them out of the way. You can't reject them mentally. You have to sort of reject them physically.
I've never seen these.
All right. And here's other, but they're not good. So, one thing that was interesting is that Bart Scher, the director, I had a long conversation with Bart. I often talk to the directors, and so he said, "Look, I want to bring something out about the racial issues in South Pacific, which have never been dealt with in quite the way I want to deal with them." And so, those of you who know the story, there are two kind of interracial romances in the story between Nellie and the plantation, the French plantation guy who had children by a previous Polynesian wife, and about the young lieutenant and the Polynesian girl. And he said, well, okay, so that part of it is sort of up at the surface of this play, this musical. But what I want to bring out is the idea that the American Navy and the American military go into the South Pacific. They take over an island. They take over, they impose a really alien culture on this little island and change it forever by doing that. So that there's a kind of imperialistic racism going on. So I thought, what represents the beautiful, unsullied South Pacific? How could I represent that? And I thought, Paul Gauguin, the paintings of Paul Gauguin. Well, of course, by the time he got there, it was a little bit sullied, but let's leave that apart. It looked great, you know. So I thought to myself, and this is the little sketch. It's like a little tiny sketch. That South Sea scene with sailors overlaid. And that became the key to the thing. So then I looked at Gauguin paintings, which are pretty easy to look at. And what I did was I painted my version of a Polynesian or South Sea scene. And you can see me testing out the sailor. And what I wanted to do was to paint the underlying the scene, this landscape, as beautifully as I could in watercolor with lush color and all that. And then rather brutally in gouache, paint these American characters like they were garbage on top of that, you know, not literally, but you know, a sense of violation. So
Is he painted on the same painting, or is he an overlay?
I painted him on the painting. It's a sketch. I tried it on. So, but now I painted on an overlay to test out what the sailors and Nellie would look like. And then once I was fairly secure in how I would paint these little figures on top of the landscape, I went right in there and I painted right on top. And it really felt right that I was in fact violating my own painting by doing this. And of course, if I didn't do it right, you know, the whole thing would be ruined. But anyway, so that became the poster for South Pacific, and that's the process. And I was very, it was a very exciting process, that particular one. That idea of the Gauguin overlaid with these sailors was like one of those eureka moments. So I'm just ending here with just showing you a couple of paintings from a memoir that I've written about my grandparents and about my early life in China and India and Canada. And it's coming out in March 11th, 2014. Algonquin Press is publishing it. Emma did the most wonderful little essay in a local magazine about this, which I'm indebted to you for. Okay, so that's the cover. We'll go through these kind of just go over them. I won't stop to tell you these stories. I'm just sort of giving you a taste of what it's like. And they're paintings like I've never done before. I've never done anything quite like this. And they really came out of these deep emotional memories of that time in my life.
Well, Jim's grandparents were missionaries in China.
Yeah, they were missionaries in China, and they saved girl babies who were being essentially thrown away by their
Well, they arrived
parents.
at a time of famine, and the families couldn't feed their children, so they would take these little
Yeah.
girls to the cemetery. This is them arriving, the missionaries.
This is the tower in which the little girl babies were thrown by the parents. This is my grandmother nursing the babies and saving them. This is building the orphanage. This is my grandmother and other women in the mission teaching the little girls embroidery, which became actually the way that they kept the orphanage going, and it eventually became an import and export, or an export business, I should say. This is my mother in the garden. This is my father playing the piano. I remember him. He was very, very musical when he played the piano every afternoon and sang. He also wrote musicals that were performed at the local club. This is my first time I ever saw a dead body on the beach. This is the Japanese arriving in the town. This is my father and my uncle and other businessmen getting the rules from the Japanese commandant about how they could operate. These are memories of the barricades along the roads, and that if you didn't have the proper papers, you were given a typhoid shot with the same needle that had been used on many people before. So it was something you tried to avoid. That's it. That. But there are 52 of these paintings, and so the book is set up in that way. So, any questions? Okay. Well, yes.
Is the book set up so that there are pictures and then you've written the
Yes.
story sort of?
On every spread, it's
Yeah,
text.
just like a small story or incident. They make an arc. I mean, they continue the story as it were, but each one is its own self.
Each one's a
Contained.
little, yeah.
Yeah, it's a kind of self-contained story, but then it leads to the next story and the next story.
So you're her first reader.
Yes, well,
You're
yes.
her first reader.
No, I have to say that I wrote this book, but Kate was just incredible as a first reader, so.
Well, it was wonderful right from the start, but Jim, Jim wrote it in third person originally, which I think it was so personal that he needed to distance himself from it. But I said, Jim, you gotta do the first person thing. He really didn't want to, but
Yeah, I didn't want it to be a sentimental book, and so I did that. I wrote it in third person as though it wasn't happening to me, but
it was
and
just a
Kate,
step in the process,
a step in the
in the writing
process,
process, a
exactly.
necessary
Yeah.
step.
Yeah. Yes.
The images are so specific. Did you paint them from memory, or did you?
I did, most of them I did. I mean, I found whatever help I could, I looked up stuff, but it was the first time that I always had a very clear idea of what the picture should look like and what the figure should be doing. So I was really able to pretty much just do it, just draw it out. And a couple of times, photographs in the family albums would help a little bit. But the thing was that once I had chosen this omniscient point of view of looking down into the scene, there are not many photographs that give you that view. You know what I mean? It's everything is sort of like this, and I was looking like that. I used as my stylistic model, at least in that respect, Chinese scrolls, which I had grown up looking at and loving and absolutely adoring those kinds of that kind of painting and that kind of seeing small figures in larger worlds. And I was really trying to do that in this book, is that there was always lots of context in terms of the surroundings and stuff. I think probably the most intimate or up-close picture was the one of the little boy in the window. They're looking out the window, but most of the others are really quite backed off. Yes?
How old are you during the time period of the book?
Well, it ends when I'm 11, so I guess it starts when I'm born, but then I'm telling the story of my grandparents before I was born, so it sort of they are the world I was born into, you know, and then it happens. The story ends at the end of the war. It ends when my mother and I take a boat out of Shanghai and return to Canada. So the war is the enclosure, at least for most of the book. Yes?
It feels like a documentary.
It's,
It feels like a documentary. But did you find that going back and creating those images were some more difficult to create than others because it's a documentary with more experience?
Yes, I don't know. For me, it's a little bit too dreamlike to be a documentary, if you know what I mean. It's the memories are very emotionalized, and I was hoping that the writing is pretty straightforward, but I was hoping that the art in some way evokes my feelings about stuff. So, you know, a documentary is a little bit cooler than that, I would say, generally. You know, I mean, it may be dealing with war and very emotional things, but it's dealing with it in a slightly cooler way. And as to whether some things were harder than others, certainly they were. And there's a place in the book where I meet my father for the first time during the war, and my mother and my father are putting me into a boarding school in India. And I'd never been to India before, I'd never been to the school before. My mother and I have been traveling. I'm 9 years old, and my mother and father had sort of gradually told me through these 3 days that we are together that they're going back to China, and they're going to leave me in the school, you know. And at the moment when they finally say goodbye to me, I break down, and I cling to my mother. And my father, who at that point is a lieutenant colonel, who's gone through hell in the war, who's been behind the lines, who's been wounded, who's, you know, seen terrible stuff, you know, says to me, "Oh, for God's sakes, be a man," you know. And that was so hard on me, you know, and has been hard on me for the rest of my life, that even painting that picture was revisiting something that, you know, it was hard. And I'm not sure it's not the best picture in the book, and that one I really did try to be cool. I tried to be way off, and seeing these three little figures in this quadrangle of this school in India. Yes?
Well, it's interesting to hear you talk about the third person, because when you're showing us the pictures, we don't have the text, it's like you are looking down at your memory, like
Yeah.
you're looking at your memory from outside of it. And
Right.
then to have, is that something that, did you have to go through that sort of stepping out of it and then sort of that process of like writing, it seems like almost part of the journey to, I don't know, to
Yeah,
just
no,
sort of
you're
like
right. No,
look
it's-
down at yourself and
Right.
a lot of my memories, I feel like I'm looking around me, right? And
Yeah.
I'm seeing that I'm the person in it, and that's
Yeah,
my visual
yeah.
picture. So it's interesting that you had to
Well-
take a different perspective in order, I just didn't know that was part of your process.
I did. I mean, first of all, I'm at an age where this stuff is pretty far back there, you know, and it almost seems like it's time to tell it as a story for whatever interest it has, you know, that it has a certain drama about it. And I wanted to say, I'm telling it as a story that might be interesting, you know, rather than getting into, as I just did a minute ago, poor me, you know. I wanted, you know, I wanted to, as much as I could, stay away from that idea that it was a tragic story. I mean, the other thing about it was that it was great to say, I was kind of the sissy kid. You know, I had a hard time in my youth, as most sissy kids do, because it's a bad way to be when you're a kid, right? But hey, I became a real artist, you know? I mean, I had the last word, and the paintings in the book are the last word, you know, that no matter how difficult these situations are, look how I can turn them into art, you know? So that became one of the thrills of doing this book. And it wasn't clear to me when I decided to do it that that would be the case, but then I began to experiment of how I'm going to do these paintings. And it was literally one day I did this painting and I thought, oh my God, I can do this. I can make this happen on a level that I couldn't have thought about before. You know, I couldn't have anticipated it quite the way that it came out. Yes.
Does it make it hard to go back to posters and picture books when you had that kind of deeply profound personal creative experience?
Yeah, unfortunately that's the other part of it, is that it's been very hard. It's been hard. I'm finally getting back into the swing of doing picture books and not working from material that is very, very personal. But I think, as Kate will tell you, I was really ready to throw in the towel entirely. You know, when I realized, okay, that was that, but now real life intrudes, you know. But, you know, it's going on. I'm working on a poster.
Between 11 and now.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
again, is this the Lincoln Center? Do they just have you do all their posters, or?
Well, no. My contract is that I do 3 posters a year. And they usually do 4 or 5 productions a year. So the agency will come up with a solution for one of the other, or 1 or 2 of the other plays. Occasionally I will do 4 posters a year. But that's how it goes. But I'm the official poster artist for Lincoln Center Theater. So that's how it works. And they can turn down any, in other words, even though they're going to pay me for 3 posters a year, the contract reads that they don't have to use any of them. But as it turns out, last year they did actually turn down one of the posters and went to something else. But usually they use them. Yeah.
Live across the street, so I walk by there a lot.
What?
I live across the street, Lincoln Center. So
Oh, you do? Oh, so you see
I
these.
walk through that plaza.
Yeah. But for Golden Boy, they didn't buy my poster, so. Anyway.
That's great.
Yeah.
About how long did it take you to start to finish the complete book?
To do a poster? Well, in none of my work can I actually sit down and work for 2 weeks straight or 3, you know. I mean, I'm always bopping around from job to job, so it's, but usually they give me a month and a half for a poster, which gives them lots of time to turn down many sketches and give me a little time. But occasionally I look out and it all goes smoothly. It's funny that the more I do these posters and the more they're out in the world, and one would think, well, surely they don't give you trouble anymore. You've got this backlog of posters that you've done, but the opposite is true, that they become experts on my work and can tell me, you know, this is not such a hot one for you, Jim. This is not your best work. So, and they all want to get in on the act, you know. Now that they don't want me to have all the fun, so I mean, last year they took the poster, they accepted it and everything, and then they changed the color. And I thought, I was so curious, and I found out this woman that's sort of in charge of that and things, and I said, who the hell are you to tell me what color to use on my poster? So she reported me to the head of Lincoln Cemetery. Jim has insulted me, and I never want to work with him again. So anyway, we kissed him and everything. But it's like that. It's like real life. Yes?
What happens to the original artwork from your picture books, from your posters?
I own it. Picture book art. I've just shipped off many crates of picture book art to the Curling collection. Just because I have storage problems. I have a lot of art, but all the art and all my theater poster art I own. I mean, some of it has been sold out over the years, and some of it Lincoln Center Theater has bought from me, you know, to give to directors, and like they bought the original for South Pacific to give to Bart Forbes, and Bart shared. And, all right, this was great.